This is CBC Here and Now.
Status quo is no longer acceptable. Instead, we will chart a new course to recovery, growth, and opportunity.
My first reaction is that I'm encouraged.
Today we heard a lot about review and consultation.
I think people were expecting to see more clear pathways forward. That's not there.
What are you going to sell off? What is it we're going to do with our resources?
They have laser focus on the idea that the immigrants will actually contribute.
Schools are already overtaxed and overburdened. It can't mean that those duties, those responsibilities simply get downloaded to schools.
Spending is up, the deficit is down, cuts are coming, but the government hasn't outlined when or where. Good evening, I'm Carolyn Stokes. Welcome to Here and Now.
And I'm Peter Cowan, live at Confederation Building tonight.
Now, we do have other news for you this evening, including a suspicious death in the west end of St. John's and the latest on COVID-19. But Peter, the budget is our top story.
Absolutely, Carolyn. It's called Change Starts Here, and starts is probably the key word because it's going to take a while for the province to deal with the financial challenges. Let's take a look at the highlights. Well, if you were thinking this would be the budget with big cuts, well, you're wrong. There's actually more spending this year. For the first time, government is going to spend more than $9 billion. But let's take a look at some of the key numbers, starting with the deficit for this year. So this year's deficit is going to be $826 million. So last year, it was $1 billion more, $1.8 billion. How did we get the deficit down? Well, not by spending less. In fact, as I mentioned, spending is going up this year. It's oil that came to the rescue again. The price of oil is up, and so is production. So there's an extra $500 million in oil royalties this year that we'll get from, it's going to be up a total of $1 billion from the oil projects this year. Now, there are plans to get to a balanced budget. It's going to take 5 years to do it, and the province is promising balanced budget legislation to help make sure that happens. Now, we heard promises about balanced budgets in 2016, and that never happened. Now,
it sets the course to achieve fiscal stability by ensuring our government spends within our means. We will introduce balanced budget legislation to ensure this and future governments are held to that requirement. It reins in and tightens control of the public purse. It ensures a return to fiscal balance within 5 years. It makes strategic economic investments. It supports those that need a hand up.
Now, the province says it has an issue with spending, not revenue. Now, there are some tax increases. We're going to get to those in a moment, but let's start with Mark Quinn on how the province plans to rein in spending and the important role that Memorial University is going to play.
The budget outlines many things the government plans to do to reduce spending, but its plan to cut offset funding to Memorial University is one of the only measures that has a concrete dollar figure attached to it. Right now, the province gives MUN more than $68 million annually to maintain its tuition freeze. Today, the government said that funding will be phased out.
We've made the decision that the tuition freeze is no longer sustainable. It will be phased out over 5 years.
MUN's president says that can only mean one thing: a tuition increase is coming.
So we know that 2022 we're going to have to lift the tuition. The Moira Green report said that, the post-secondary review report said that, the government budget said that. So we'll be working over the next month to bring something to the Board of Regents for 2022.
The education minister says the province can find savings by integrating government bodies like the English School District into core government.
At this particular stage, it's fair to say we don't know we can't put a finite number on the amount or the level of operational efficiencies, but they exist.
To reduce healthcare spending, the government says it will integrate corporate services at regional health authorities, such as payroll, finance, and accounting. And the health minister says more changes are likely to come.
I think it's a sensible step we can start now without prejudging the outcome of the health accord. essentially what we're looking to the Health Accord to provide is a model for quality care. What we then have to do in the coming months and years is figure out how to deliver that and how to pay for it.
The government maintains that these changes won't lead to massive job cuts or even some job losses.
Not that we're seeing at this point in time, but certainly through attrition, perhaps, as we move forward.
All of these proposed changes have some union leaders on high alert.
Unfortunately, in the past when we've talked about efficiencies about how many full-time equivalents, well, that's people. That's Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that would lose their jobs.
None of these changes come into effect immediately. The government says there's a lot of reviewing and consulting to do in the months to come. Today's budget is called Change Starts Here, but if real changes are going to come, they may not come until the next budget. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, student groups aren't happy with the plan to cut funding for Memorial University and eliminate the tuition freeze next year.
We're incredibly disappointed to see that the government is making a pretty clear stance that they are backing away from their commitment to fund post-secondary education. Particularly, that's taking the form of the elimination of the tuition offset grant. They're planning on fully eliminating that in the next 5 years. That's something that is incredibly alarming to us as a student movement. The tuition freeze and the relatively affordable tuition has been one of the main factors that draws students to this province.
They gave autonomy to the memorial to actually increase the tuition fees. And on that aspect, they do not realize that some students, that creates a barrier.
Well, government is also looking for savings by absorbing some Crown corporations and organizations. The Newfoundland and Labrador Centre for Health Information, which is involved in e-health and analyzing health data, will become part of the Department of Health and Community Services. Also, the 911 emergency service, which is a not-for-profit corporation, will also be absorbed by core government. Government also plans to review its assets in offshore oil and gas projects, real estate, and the Newfoundland and Labrador Liquor Corporation. And Tourism Minister Steve Crocker says they're still looking to offload Marble Mountain.
It's a major piece of infrastructure on the West Coast for physical activity and for tourism and hospitality. So it's very important that we make sure that when it is sold, it goes to the right buyer.
So how does this budget affect your budget? What will it do to your wallet? Here Now's Katie Breen is standing by with a breakdown. So Katie, how does it all look?
Well, that depends on your lifestyle. Health is one of the main areas for new taxes and rebates. That's because government wants Newfoundland and Labrador to become one of the healthiest provinces in Canada over the next 10 years. It's planning to do that by taxing bad habits and incentivizing the good ones. First up, what people are calling the Pepsi tax.
The province is going to make sugary drinks more expensive. It's tacking on an extra 20 cents per litre. The province considered doing that in 2016, but ultimately decided it would be too complicated and costly to manage. The new sugar tax is supposed to kick in about a year. We'll be the first in the country to have it. Analysts are looking at how to actually implement it now. Government is expecting it'll bring in close to $9 million annually. Smokes are also going to cost more. Cigarettes are going up 3 cents each, and fine-cut tobacco is going to cost an extra 6 cents per gram. This year's increase will bring the province's cigarette prices in line with BC, which are the highest in the country. On the incentive side of things, government is going to bring in a physical activity tax credit. Families can qualify for up to $2,000 to help offset the cost of sports and recreation. Not totally clear yet on what exactly will qualify, but today, a family gym pass was given as an example. For low-income earners who are pregnant or have children under the age of 1, the province is bumping the mother-baby nutrition supplement from $60 a month up to $100, and period products are going to be supplied in K-12 schools. Then there's some incentives around the environment, trying to incentivize greener choices. If your home is heated exclusively by oil, there's a rebate to convert your house to electric, up to $2,500, and another $2,500 rebate if you purchase an electric vehicle. The province is earmarking enough money for 200 cars.
And that's your roundup of taxes and rebates. Carolyn?
Thanks so much, Katie. That's Here Now's Katie Breen reporting live from Confederation Building. Well, another way you'll pay more, the carbon tax is going up. As of July 1st, that will add about 2 cents a litre to gasoline, a little more for diesel fuel. This is because the federal government is increasing the price of carbon, but it will add about $50 million to government's revenue, and unlike other years, there will be no cut to the gas tax to compensate for that increase. There were also supports announced for businesses struggling during the pandemic. $30 million will go towards a tourism and hospitality support program for operators in the province, and $20 million will be used to help small businesses and community organizations that have increased costs or have lost revenue during the pandemic. Government is also investing in immigration as a solution to deal with the shrinking population, including setting new targets in its immigration strategy. The Association for New Canadians is pleased that the budget promises to help those newcomers get the skills needed to find work.
I'm pretty excited about the fact that the government has made it quite clear that they have laser focus on the idea that the immigrants will actually contribute to the population growth in the province. So they are not only providing the investment in bringing more immigrants to the province, but also the investment required in building their capacity to shorten or bridge the gap between the labor market needs and the skill sets of the newcomers.
Let's talk about income taxes, because they are going up, but only if you make more than $136,000 a year. The province is introducing some new income tax brackets for higher income earners at levels like $250,000 and $500,000 a year. But because there aren't very many people who actually earn those levels, the amount of money it's going to bring in is only about $15 million a year. Well, let's talk about oil and gas. If you were hoping in this budget that the province might move away from relying on oil and gas, both for the economy and the finances, you're probably going to be a little disappointed. The minister signaled today that, in fact, this province wants to get more out of the oil and gas industry.
It's still a very important part of the Newfoundland and Labrador economy. It'll be part of the Canadian and international economy for decades to come. And we would prefer to have Newfoundland and Labrador oil on the international markets than anything else. So I think it's important that we continue to grow our oil and gas industry.
Now, the Newfoundland and Labrador government owns some oil and gas shares, and of course there's also the future of Nalcor Energy. Terry Roberts is looking at that part. So Terry, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, well, when we asked the finance minister today, will Nalcor be around in 1 or 2 years? Well, her body language revealed just how sensitive that question is right now. She paused for a few seconds before saying this.
We're going to be looking at how do we ensure that we have the best means and mechanisms for delivering our energy services in the province.
In other words, it's possible that Nalcor could be shut down, but no one is ready to say it, at least officially.
There's lots of things I would absolutely love to say, but I don't want to put myself or box myself in. The fact is that we have made and we are making a very solid commitment that we are going to be having a look at the future of Nalcor, and that's where it is.
This report, The Big Reset, dropped last month and is recommending Nalcor's demise, saying it is too expensive to operate and has too much duplication. That's creating plenty of uncertainty for the 1,600 people who work at Nalcor.
There's a lot of expertise that that entity has built up over the last number of years that we're going to need to hold on to, but that doesn't mean we can't look at the entity as a whole to determine if it's going in the right direction.
This is Muskrat Falls, the troubled hydroelectric project that's nearly $6 billion over budget. It's a Nalcor-led project, and it's scheduled for completion later this year. Once commissioned, it threatens to send the province into energy poverty, with electricity rates scheduled to double unless the federal government offers some sort of bailout. A public inquiry found that Nalcor misled the province when it came to the sanctioning of Muskrat Falls, and that those managing the project did not have the ability or experience to provide proper oversight. With Muskrat just about complete, the Energy Minister says it's time to scrutinize Nalcor, but he won't prejudge the outcome.
The fact is that there's a lot of different contractual arrangements here that, again, I wouldn't be silly enough to say that I have a complete grasp on. There's a lot of work that's going to have to be done, especially from the legal perspective.
Now, change is already underway at Nalcor. CEO Stan Marshall, he's the man who was brought in more than 5 years ago to stabilize Muskrat Falls. Well, he's out in mid-June. He'll chair his final annual general meeting on June 10th, and then he's retiring. And there's also several other top key executives at Nalcor who have either left or are about to leave. Now, Energy Minister Andrew Parsons says today that he believes the transition to a new CEO will be, he thinks it will be a seamless one. And one of the first jobs for this new CEO, the replacement for Stan Marshall, will be to figure out the future for Nalcor. Reporting live from Confederation Building, I'm Terry Roberts for Here and Now.
Well, the PCs and NDP weren't impressed with the budget today, saying it raises more questions than answers. Over the next few weeks, the opposition says it hopes to get more details on the plan.
The first thing that jumps out is the increase in expenditure. At a time when we talk about fiscal restraint, we actually are prepared to have the highest expenditure in the history of the province. So that's the first thing. But even more important is the second thing, is the fact that next year we're going to reduce that by $900 million. So I'm going to be really interested in what that number is made up of and how does it impact the people of Newfoundland and Labrador.
This is a budget built by someone who has no idea the struggles of everyday Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have in trying to make ends meet. We have an economy that is not working for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. We are missing the affordability piece, and this budget does nothing to allay the fears of the people who are struggling to make ends meet right now.
Well, the business community and labor sector had mixed opinions. While one group is pleased to see a commitment to dealing with the finances, the other felt government was too vague.
I'm encouraged that the province has opened the door to a conversation that at least I haven't heard before. They're talking about consolidating some services to save money going forward. They're talking about evaluating the way we do things, how we provide services. They're talking about partnerships with not only the private sector but with other social groups, all with the goal to make our services as they exist today better and more efficient.
I'm confused more than anything. There was a lot of will review stuff, a lot of political nonsense words. I guess that joint partnerships, joint solutions, speaking with business and the community, and value for money, and those things that quite frankly scare me, because in our world that means people will be poorer.
I think people were expecting to see more clear pathways forward. That's not there, so it leaves us a lot of concern. It's more about what's not said than what is said. So that's the things that we will seek out now in the days and weeks ahead from the Minister of Finance, from the Premier herself and other government officials, because that's concerning. We need some clarity around a lot of these buzzwords that are used.
There's much more to parse through from today's provincial budget. We'll have a live interview with the Finance Minister, our Political Observers panel, and we'll hear from an economist on whether any of these changes will help the province. But we're going to turn our attention now to some other local news. Police in St. John's are investigating a suspicious death after the body of a man was discovered near a trail in the city's West End. The body was found around 8:30 yesterday in a wooded area near Waterford Valley High. Police remained on the scene today just off Topsail Road. They're working with the chief medical examiner to determine the cause of death. The RNC is looking for the public's help, asking anyone who may have video footage of the area or any information to contact police or Crime Stoppers. In court news, Steve Bragg has pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the strangling of Victoria Head. The mother of one from Placentia lived in St. John's at the time of her death. Head's family held back tears as Bragg described the murder and how he left her body on the side of St. John's Road in 2017. Bragg was slated to stand trial on a first-degree murder charge, but in an unexpected move this morning, the Crown agreed to downgrade that charge to second-degree murder. That charge carries a mandatory minimum sentence of life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. Bragg's motivations for the murder aren't known to the public. His lawyer requested he be released on bail while he awaits sentencing to spend time with his wife and children, but the judge denied that request. Well, across the country today, flags are at half-mast in memory of 215 residential school victims. The missing children, some as young as 3 years old, were undocumented deaths. Their unmarked graves were recently discovered on the grounds of a former residential school in Kamloops, BC. In St. John's, flags were lowered at DFO, City Hall, Memorial University, and the Confederation Building today. Meanwhile, 215 small felt squares were attached to the fence of the Colonial Building over the weekend. It's unknown who's responsible for that tribute, but the colors, black, white, red, and yellow, are thought to represent the colors of an Indigenous medicine wheel. First Light erected this tent on the grounds of the St. John's Friendship Center today. Attached are 215 ribbons, one for each child who didn't make it home. The center says the Indigenous community is hurting at this time and is encouraging people to visit its Water Street location for support and to offer up prayers. There are 2 new cases of COVID-19 in the province today. One is in the Central Health area, but is not connected to the ongoing cluster in the region. It's related to a previous case. The second case is in the Western region and tied to international travel. There are now 101 active cases in the province, and 2 people are in hospital. The Stephenville cluster now stands at 11 cases, with 3 presumptive positive cases. The Stephenville, St. George's, and Port-au-Port area moved into alert level 4 over the weekend. The medical officer of health announced the move during an unexpected media briefing yesterday. The source of the cluster is still unknown, and people are being told to get tested whether they have symptoms or not.
The whole paradigm that we had where your mom sent you to school when you were sick and you went to work when you were sick, we just don't have that. We have the luxury of that in COVID-19 anymore. And so I really need people to get tested. Even if they have a mild symptom, don't just say, oh, it's probably nothing. I really need you to get tested.
It's a big budget, and coming up next on Here Now, we're going to talk to the Finance Minister. Siobhan Cody joins me to answer a few questions. That's coming up next. Welcome back to Confederation Building. I'm here with the Finance Minister, the woman who wrote this budget, Siobhan Cody, and thanks for joining us.
Absolutely happy to be here.
I want to ask you about one of the measures in here. It's not a lot of money, but it's gotten a lot of attention, and that's the sugary drinks tax, adding 20 cents a litre onto every sugary drink. This was an idea that when it was raised and brought to your predecessor, Kathy Bennett, she said it wasn't very practical to do. No other province has done it. Why do you think that it is feasible for Newfoundland and Labrador to do?
Well, certainly other jurisdictions around the world have implemented this tax, including a number of municipalities in the United States. So we'll be looking at their experiences and how they were able to bring forward a tax. This is really about health. And as we know, we have a tremendous amount of challenges with our health in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're working to ensure that we tax where the benefits will be in health. So, for example, when you look at a sugary drink, putting on a modest amount of tax on a sugary drink will help with our healthcare costs.
But what about the concern that this will disproportionately impact low-income people? They're the people who can afford a 2-liter bottle at 99 cents. They're not able to buy the healthier drinks that are more expensive. This isn't going to make those any cheaper.
No, I mean, the whole idea here is to tax these sugary drinks so people will find alternatives. And, we have many, many programs to assist people with supports for poverty. We will be doing a poverty reduction strategy, a renewal of that strategy this year. And there is a tremendous amount of money towards those that are vulnerable and less fortunate in our province. So we're going to keep working with people to bring them out and lift them out of poverty.
I want to ask you about the plan for a balanced budget. It's going to take us 5 years in order to get there. We heard that back in 2016. There was a 5-year plan for a balanced budget. That balanced budget never came. How do we know that we're actually going to get there this time?
Well, that's an interesting question. We were moving towards a balanced budget. Our deficit was coming down, and then COVID hit, of course, and it shot back up again, and things have been a little bit unstable because of COVID. But now we're putting back our efforts to making sure that we do the transformations and modernizations that are incredibly important to government. I mean, you're looking at things that began 50 years ago in government, and we're now looking at how do we modernize, transform government, how do we improve service delivery, and how do we address our financial concerns. I mean, that's really what this budget outlines. And so what we're doing is making a very pragmatic and practical, very diligent choices of how to get to a balanced budget and making sure that we do that. But if you'd looked at the plan previously, we would have been in balanced budget within the next couple of years. Now we're saying it might take a little bit longer because of COVID.
I want to ask you, because a lot of the things that we're seeing in this budget were not things that were in the Liberal election platform. That election was just 2 months ago. There was no talk then of raising income tax for higher income people. There wasn't talk of cutting funding for Memorial University, ending the tuition freeze, the sugary drinks tax. All of these are new things. Why didn't we see some of these ideas just a couple of months ago when you went to voters? Well, isn't this a bit of a bait and switch? You got elected on one thing and now you're doing something
absolutely different? Absolutely not. This is a practical approach to going to a balanced budget. As you know, the people of the province are very, very aware of the financial situation that we have in the province. And how do we take a very balanced and appropriate response to getting us to ensuring we address our deficit and making sure then we can address our debt. So we're taking on some of the heavy lifting to make sure that we both modernize and transform government, to make sure that we not only improve service delivery but really focus on that financial future that we're going to have. I think all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want to take that action. They want to take that action now, and we're delivering on that. We've heard through many, many forums, including through your listeners, basically saying, get on with it. We need to make sure we get on with it, and we're doing just that. We're doing things to make sure that we transform and modernize, but also address our financial concerns, but doing it so that we're not, harming the economy or harming people. We're doing it very practically.
Well, Finance Minister Siobhan Cody, thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Okay, so that's the view from the Finance Minister. Let's find out how an economist sees the province's financial blueprint for the coming years. Lynn Gambin is an economist at MUN, and she joins us now live. So, Ms. Gambin, let's start with your thoughts on what you've been hearing today. There's a lot to digest in this budget. What did you think of it?
There is. I had an interview this morning, and I think I didn't get it completely right, of course, my crystal ball, but there weren't cuts that we were expecting to see. There are some changes, some increases in tax. There are, of course, some cuts as well on the revenue side, but nothing kind of close to what I had been expecting. I think it was a softer, a less shocking budget than it could have been.
Now, government is increasing some taxes, targeting people who earn over $136,000. Cigarettes will cost more, and you heard the finance minister talking about the sugary drinks tax. Do you think that these tax increases go far enough?
Well, if you were to read the People's Recovery Report, that one, of course, is very heavily looking at taxation as a way of increasing revenues to improve the fiscal situation of the province. So there are some of these changes in there that increase in the highest tax brackets, more brackets at the top with a 2.5% change in the very top income bracket that they're recommending or that they're planning on putting in place. The consumption tax, of course, it's not unusual to see increases in consumption taxes on things like cigarettes and things like the sugar tax, which, as the minister just said in her interview a moment ago, those are also not just looking at revenue, they're also there to try to improve people's behavior or their choices about their consumption and to sway them towards more healthy options. Unfortunately, things like the sugar tax don't always work that way. Similarly, the cigarette tax or tobacco tax doesn't always give us the health benefits that we want to see. And as others have said, it sometimes hits people who can least afford that increase in the cost of their consumption, and they don't change their consumption as well. So there could have been more, I think, in this, if you compare it to some of the recommendations that have come out from other things. I don't know, there wasn't much there in terms of corporate tax or luxury taxes. There was a note in the budget about looking at HST and how to ensure they can make changes to that won't impact vulnerable groups or disproportionately. But there could be more.
We've known for a long time that the province is in a dire fiscal situation. The alarm bells have been sounding over the fiscal crisis and our enormous debt load. But there's actually an increase in spending in this budget rather than a decrease. What did you make of that?
Yeah, so I think that's already been receiving some negative reactions from the public, from business as well, because it has been perceived to be a spending problem that the government has. And of course, we've seen government spending increase dramatically over the last, say, decade. So we do expect to see some of those changes as was put forward in the speech and in interviews leading up to it from the Premier. We didn't expect perhaps to see big cuts right now. There were some, of course, but it's undeniable that I think we can't fix the problem completely on the revenue side. Taxation will only go so far, relying on oil and gas revenues, especially when we have volatility and we have agendas towards changing due to climate change and changing the focus on that industry. We can't really rely on that revenue side in that way. So there are some cuts there, things like consolidating functions, back office functions of the regional health authorities as they currently stand. Of course, there's cuts there to Memorial University and some others as well. Any of those cuts really need to be executed very carefully, and even consolidating kind of back office functions needs to make sure that there's software, there's management capacity, there's skills in place there to make sure that those services and those programs can still be delivered in an effective way. So we do, even though you might get economies of scale, so as you have more things people in core government, you should be able to provide them more cost effectively. It doesn't necessarily come true that that will happen. Things are too unwieldy, too big to manage, or if you just don't have the skills there to do that and to deliver them effectively.
Well, there's certainly a lot to talk about in this budget. Lynn Gambin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Boy, went 4 for 4 for sunshine today, or this weekend rather. We do have some rain on the way, much needed rain on the way, but I'll get into all those details when I come back.
This weather update is brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. It's time to explore the great wide open. Plan your trip at yourbackyardbeckons.ca.
Time for a look at the weather, and what a beautiful forecast we've had. The weather on the weekend was glorious in St. John's. I hope it's going to stick around for a while.
Well, there's some much needed rain on the way, actually.
Good for the plants.
That's right. Yeah. Very good for the plants. Let's take a look at the temperatures today across the board. It was beautiful. 19, 20 degrees for most of us. Along the west coast, a little bit cooler, 16 degrees. And then the south coast as well saw, unfortunately, some cooler temperatures. Around 7 degrees was the afternoon high for Port aux Basques. Same thing for Burgeo. And then highs today across Labrador, gorgeous. 15 to 19 degrees as your daytime highs. And those current temperatures sitting there, we've lost a few degrees here and there, but overall still a beautiful evening. But we mentioned how gorgeous the weather has been and also the lack of rain. In fact, we went from 290 plus millimeters of rain in St. John's in April to 36 millimeters of rain over the last or over most of May. So no surprise that the fire hazard map is now at very high through parts of Central. So that rain certainly much needed, but unfortunately there is the risk of some thunderstorms over the next couple days, certainly around Bonavista North, and then for the west coast as well as we head through the night tonight. So currently, we saw some increasing cloud through most of the day. Some high cloud has moved in now, but we'll start to see some of that lower cloud move in for eastern areas as we head through the night tonight. The chance of showers will move in for the west coast as well as parts of Labrador, the southeastern portion, and it will be heavy at times once we get past midnight. And with this, around into the early morning hours, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you can expect potentially to hear a few rumbles of thunder for the west coast, heading towards the Bayvert Peninsula as we get into the morning hours of some of this heavier rain. At least that's what it's looking like the best chance of that thunderstorm activity will be as we head into tomorrow. Now that rain's going to work its way across the island as we head through the afternoon hours, and then for southeastern Labrador you'll see that risk of some showers moving through again through the day, but there's that risk of potential thunderstorm potential as I was talking about, and this will take us through the early morning hours to about 10 or 11 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, or tomorrow morning rather. So temperatures tonight still pretty nice, 10, 11 degrees through central, a little cooler in the eastern areas. Now, the risk of showers will move in towards the early morning hours. Most of tonight should actually stay fairly dry. And then we're looking at dry conditions up across Labrador as well, with partly to mostly cloudy skies. Your temperatures dipping to about 3 to 7 degrees as your overnight lows. Now tomorrow, here's that rain working its way through. By the afternoon, most of that rain should have worked its way through central. Eastern areas will continue to see that risk as we head through the early evening hours, and then there's that risk and potential for some showers for southeastern Labrador into the afternoon. Just a few showers possible through central. They'll be more isolated in nature through the day. Now, taking a look at the forecast for tomorrow, temperature, or rather the rainfall forecast for tonight into tomorrow. There's that much needed rain I was talking about 10 to 20 millimeters of rain through the day. And then we're looking at about 5 to 5 millimeters of rain for eastern areas, and this will take us through to Wednesday morning. So not quite significant amounts of rain, but at least enough to water the flowers as we head through Tuesday. Temperatures tomorrow looking beautiful. 10 to or 11 degrees down through the southwest, and then the rest of central and eastern areas should actually reach the double digits as we get into the afternoon hours, and then between 14 to 17 degrees across Labrador. As we get into Wednesday, a better chance that we'll see some thunderstorms around Bonavista North, and that will be into the afternoon hours. Otherwise, a pretty nice day. Just the showers will move through, and then Thursday is actually setting up to be fairly nice as well. We're not going to see a whole lot of change in the temperatures, even an increase as we head through Wednesday. Temperatures sitting anywhere from 20 to 23 degrees. A little cooler again for the southwest, but still beautiful. Port aux Basques 15 degrees, and then continuing to see those double digits across Labrador, except in the north. But you'll see those temperatures warm up as you head into Thursday, cracking 24. It looks like for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, number of areas as well across the island will see similar forecast as far as those temperatures go into Thursday. And then after that, Friday, we're looking at about 19, 20 degrees right in through the weekend. We might see the chance of a few showers Friday night, but overall looking like a pretty beautiful forecast. Central Newfoundland looking at that chance of thunderstorms, like I said, on Wednesday. By Thursday looking nice. Friday and Saturday looking a little bit unsettled with that chance of showers. And then western Newfoundland, 20 degrees as the afternoon high on Friday. And then for Labrador, you're looking at sunshine, maybe a few showers on Friday, but a little bit more unsettled in the west. Your weather photo for tonight, evening view near Northwest River. Iris Allen shared that one with us. And if you have any weather photos, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Welcome back to Confederation Building. In this budget announced today, the government is trying to make you do some good things. If you go to the gym or buy an electric car, you're going to get a rebate. But the flip side, if you're a smoker or buy sugary drinks, you're going to pay more in taxes. So is this the right approach for government to be taking? Let's bring in our political outsiders panel, and these are people who are watching politics closely. Gillian Pearson is a former PC candidate, Hassan Hai, a former Liberal candidate, and Caitlin Urquhart, she has volunteered with the NDP. So I want to start out, let's start with Caitlin on this. Is this the right approach for government to be taking when it comes to taxation?
I think the challenge is that when you're talking about tax rebates, you're generally going to advantage folks who have the disposable income to afford to pay upfront and then get their rebate later. So this is really targeted at folks who have that type of disposable income. And it's certainly not going to help the folks who are going to be most impacted by the cuts that are coming, the cuts to services to lower income folks.
Hassan, I want to get you to weigh in there. What do you think about who's going to be impacted and who's going to be helped with this?
I'm looking at the cuts to MUN, which of course is going to translate to raised tuition. We're looking at, a tax on cigarettes, on pop, which broadly, on the surface, hey, that sounds great, but who is it impacting? And who is it hurting the most as well? As well as, what is the actual benefit? How much are we going to, how much Pepsi tax revenue are we really going to make versus all the cuts here? And then, I'm mirroring Caitlin's points here, is that who does it help and who does it impact the most?
So, Jillian, I want to ask you with this, isn't the overall intention a good one, though, that we want to try and make those behaviors that make us unhealthy more expensive, while at the same time trying to incentivize those healthy behaviors, things like going to the gym?
So I do believe the finance minister did specifically say that they were setting the goal to ensure that Newfoundland and Labrador were one of the most healthiest provinces in the country, which is great, and we need to be striving in our health outcomes. However, consumption taxes actually doesn't curb behavior, so it certainly does act as a punishment, but it doesn't really deter any lowering of consumption of those particular items. And as Caitlin and Hassan have said, that's fine. So it is a tax grab and you will make more revenue off of that. But that's all it is. It's not actually, it shouldn't be framed as part of a healthy initiative strategy.
Yeah. And I think sort of building on that, the reality is that the money that goes, for example, to the $2,000 fitness credit could go to things like ensuring that there's accessible active transit and accessible, like low cost recreation. And that's more likely to reach a broader range of individuals and to have a sort of more wide reaching impact than the $2,000 credit for fitness, which is again only going to reach those folks who have that disposable income to front the money and wait for their tax credit.
Yeah, so these boutique tax
Hassan, it
credits,
sounded like you wanted.
They actually work for people. Oh.
Go on.
So I just want to say those boutique tax credits, they do I think there's a bit of a delay. The tax credits, like Caitlin was mentioning, they do favor people who have the money up front to pay for these services. And then it's a small little bonus at the end when you get your taxes back. So that money, it may be providing a small impact to one family, but collectively that money may be better diverted somewhere else.
Yeah, and what I was going to jump in there.
Perspective.
Oh, are we, so really
go ahead,
quickly
Hassan.
here, if we're talking about like social determinants of health and we're talking about, encouraging healthier behaviors, punishing people for their existing behaviors is not the right track. If you want people eating and drinking healthier, make healthy food accessible and affordable. Don't punish people for buying what they can afford. If that happens to be pop, and if it's cigarettes, work on smoking cessation campaigns, not punishing people who are already addicted.
Well, an interesting perspective. I appreciate all three of you for joining me.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
We've been talking a lot about the soaring cost of lumber lately, leading to many home projects being put on hold. Well, Canadians may forego furniture shopping as well. Ottawa recently imposed heavy tariffs on furniture imported from China and Vietnam to help Canadian manufacturers. It was supposed to stop the flood of cheap products. Instead, it caused dramatic sticker shock. Jacqueline Hansen explains.
At this furniture store in Victoria, BC, the recent price jump is staggering. This $2,000 couch is now $6,000.
This is going to have a huge effect on our business.
Half the upholstered couches and chairs sold here are imported from China and Vietnam and are now subject to a new tariff of up to 300%.
I've canceled almost 35 containers of product coming until the end of the year. That's $1 million of sales.
The tariff is in response to a complaint filed by Manitoba-based furniture producer Palliser. It claims that government-subsidized producers in China and Vietnam are selling furniture in Canada for far under market value. Palliser says the imports have caused injury and are threatening to cause further injury to the Canadian industry. The timing isn't a surprise to this trade lawyer.
Is if you know that under both President Trump and President Biden that they're also targeting that particular industry, why not see what Canada would do if you make the same complaint here?
But in the U.S., tariffs on furniture from China have been somewhat easier to swallow, first 10, then 25%.
We would love to absorb the cost, but we can't pay for people to take product. I mean, it's not good business to do that.
No.
Ottawa-based LD Shop spells out the impact for its Canadian customers. What was its bestseller now comes with a tariff that costs almost as much as the chair itself.
The legislative intent in this specific case was really good, but I think in this case, it didn't protect the entire supply chain.
But some local manufacturers support it.
It's justified, maybe 10 years too late.
This owner says it finally recognizes Canadian furniture makers are being undercut and simply can't compete.
How is it that a piece of furniture can arrive in Canada for less than just our raw material cost is? And we're only asking for it to be fair. That's all.
The Canada Border Services Agency is still investigating. A decision on whether or not these tariffs are permanent will follow. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, Peter, before we finish up, there's so much in the budget today, but one thing we haven't really talked about are job cuts. What did you hear about that today?
Carolyn, there really weren't any specific figures, and we asked a lot of times exactly how many jobs are going to be lost as they do all these things like consolidate various health authority back-end functions like IT and purchasing, things like that. As they bring the school board in here to be part of government, how is that going to work? So that's going to be one of the things to keep an interesting eye on, Carolyn, as we move forward, is just how many job cuts, because right now government doesn't have a sense, but there are hundreds of millions of dollars that they're going to have to cut in spending. So the only way to do that is jobs.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for your coverage of this today, and thank you everyone at home for watching. Hope to see you tomorrow.